Hello everyone, this is Reza. Welcome to another video of Nuke for Beginners series. In the previous video we talked about how to use a read node to our advantage, and we talked about Nuke's color management workflow and how to export out our footage. Now in this video we're going to pick up where we left off in the previous video, and we're going to talk about masks and Roto node. Now here I am inside Nuke, and my first backdrop is ready to go. Now if you would like to start with a Roto node, that can be found under Draw, Roto, and we have another one, a Roto Paint, because R is already taken. The node Read uses the hotkey R. Because of that we use a letter O as a hotkey. So if I hover my mouse in the node graph pane and press O, I'm going to create my Roto node. We have another one, as we just saw. It's called Roto Paint, and the hotkey for that is letter P, and they look quite similar on the surface. So if I double click on the Roto node, you can see we have access to some side tools as well as a few tabs in here: transform, motion, blur, and shape, clone, lifetime tracking, and node. If I double click on Roto Paint node, we have some extra tools available to us. Plus we have this tab, which we don't have in the normal Roto node. To put that in a simple term, if all you're doing is rotoscopy, then the Roto node is an optimal choice. And it allows you to create and edit Bezier and B-spline shapes. Simple as that. Whereas the Roto Paint node is a kind of vector-based node that allows you to do more than rotoscopy. So rig removal, garbage matting, and dust busting, which we will talk about those techniques later in future courses. So we are not going to use Roto Paint for now. Let's familiar ourselves with Roto node. Once we understand how Roto node works, then there's a big overlap. You can easily move to a Roto Paint node and explore some extra tools that is available to us within that Roto Paint node. Now, the Roto node itself, if I just press 1, basically there's nothing in the Roto node, and if I double click on it, you can see that the resolution is 720p. If I press S here to bring my project setting, you can see the resolution that it's taking it from the size format that we specify for our project settings. But if you're in doubt, always you can drop in a reformat node to make sure that Roto node is using the right format. Now the Roto node itself, if you double click on it, has 3 main buttons. You can actually create curves, or you can edit, add, remove points, or you can select points and reposition them. So let's start with the first one. If I hold my left mouse button, you can see we have more than Bezier. We have Bezier, cusp Bezier, B-spline, so on and so forth. So let's go and very quickly explore Bezier first. So Bezier is nothing more than just click and draw, and you cycle back to the very first point to close the curve. If you don't want to close the curve, then you press escape, which I think is a bad idea. Now right off the bat, as soon as you create this in the property bin, if I go into Roto node, you can see, first things first, we do not have any fill, simply because we're drawing into the alpha. I can just switch to RGB or RGBA. With RGBA, not only you're getting some colors within the curve, but also if I press A, you can see I'm getting the exact same shape as my alpha. If you go to output and just select RGBA, there's nothing in alpha. So it's always a good idea to have the extra channel, alpha channel, available in case if you would like to feed that to another image. Now, if you're using Bezier, you cannot see the points. Now, the way you make the points available is by clicking on this curve right here. Now, we're going to talk about this in a sec, but let's focus on the controls that we have available on this viewer. So if I zoom in, you can actually select, and as soon as you select, your tool changes from creation to selecting the points. So you can actually select a point, you can move it around, right? You can reshape it however you want to, and have a different shape, completely different shape. As you can notice that these points are really pointy and sharp. You may want to have a smooth curvature, and that's where we have the right click available to us. So you can actually go and smooth each point by pressing Z on your keyboard, or Z, or just click on that, and that gives you this tangent to even take this further. You can actually keep pressing Z and inflate the area, or you can do the opposite. Shift Z, as you can see, deflates it, or I'm just going to press Shift Z until you get back to what we call the cusp, which is a pointy, sharp angle. So you can actually select all of these points, press Z and make them smooth, or get a completely different shape, or Shift Z to bring the whole curve back to very angular and pointy. Very, very handy. And there's only one thing that I would like to explain, and that is feather. So for each point, you can actually introduce feather. So you can say, I would like to have feather, or you can press E and you get this tiny gizmo which you can just extend, and that gives you some sort of a fall off. So if you would like not to have a very sharp edge, then giving this feather is always helpful. Of course, you can always go back and reset your feather if you don't want, but a little bit of feather is actually quite helpful, especially if you're rotoing out a photo and you don't want to have super sharp edge. Then pressing E and kind of extending that handle will specify how much feather you would like to have. You can actually free transform it however you want to, pressing E to enable it. And again, at any point of time, you can go back and reset the tool. Now, resetting feather is Shift E, very similar to Z. Shift Z, E for feather, Shift E to reset. So I'm just pressing Shift E on these points to reset them to the original cusp with no feather situation. So that's basically a quick look at how Bezier curve works. I can actually right click on my property bin and say delete, and then let's create a new one, and this one is cusp Bezier. As the name suggests, it actually creates a cusp one as opposed to the Bezier one, because if I select the Bezier and right here, if I move my mouse, it's no longer cusp. So I can actually create a smooth curve right off the bat, right, and close it here, whereas with cusp Bezier, you don't have that option. So if I left mouse drag to left and right, I'm getting nothing because it forces these points to be cusp. Now the question is, can I smooth it at any point of time? I'm gonna press Z and again inflate the area. So that's these two. I'm gonna delete them. And moving to the B-spline, which is a slightly different way of working. If you're a Maya user, you probably worked with B curve and E curves, and this is exactly the same, where you draw points and those points are like holes or shells, and they indirectly control the curvature in your curve. Now, one really handy shortcut for B-spline is Control-Shift on a point to cusp it. So if I, let's say, select this point and hold down Control-Shift and left mouse button, you can see how cool this is. I'm actually changing the directionality or the pointiness of this curve right here, which is quite handy. That's I would say that's the only difference. We do have the same options available to us. We can actually introduce a fall off through feather, or we can reset the feather the exact same way that we reset the feather on B-spline. So reset the feather does the exact same thing. And apart from these two freeform creations, we have some ready to go ones, spherical sort of shape and rectangular sort of shape that is ready to go. Cusp rectangular, as the name suggests. With those guys, with this rectangle, you can, it comes with tangents and you can move them. With this, as you can see, it's just cusp, unless you go and smooth it intentionally, and then you can use Z and Shift Z to your advantage. And the very last one is open spline. So I can actually delete all three and just use open spline. And this open spline is an interesting one because it gives you tangents to change the thickness, and that thickness comes with fall off by itself. Something to be mindful of is this twisting that is happening for each curve. You can always go to this tangent right here. If I reset that, or I should just reduce the tangent, you can kind of solve the problem by tweaking some of these points. But again, as you can see, it's not really intuitive. There you go. I fixed it, but again, I changed the shape or the contour of my curve as well. So a little bit tricky, I found, to work with, and I don't know, it's just a personal preference. With this one, again, you can do that and get rid of that little knot. But if you want to get the same thing with Bezier or B-spline, I think it's much easier. So that's a quick look on how to create them. And again, you can go here, if I kind of deselect, or rather delete, and create a simple rectangle. You can actually go ahead with this tool and add points, right? So that's something that you can do. If you think you've drawn a shape and it needs more point, that's how you add it. You can of course remove points, and you can actually cusp them as well through here. So cusp point, very similar to the shortcut that we used by right clicking and going Shift Z and Z. These two do the same thing, cusp, smooth, and then you can open or close a curve and remove the feather, which is equal to Shift E, reset the feather that we've already discussed. So I'm just going to go remove this point right here to bring the whole thing back to a rectangle. And now let's see how we can make use of something like this to our advantage when we have a shape here. So I'm going to reposition my interface and just quickly show you the property bin. We can change the visibility of the curves. We can lock them so we don't modify them by accident. You can actually give the stroke a color. So I can say I want the color for the stroke to be, if I go here and here and here, you can see I've introduced a yellow color for the stroke. You can do the same thing for the actual fill. You can give it a color, whatever color you have in mind. What is the lifespan for this curve? Which, there's a tab for it here. You can see, make it visible as long as we have the time slider available. Start to frame, single frame, frame to end, and frame range, which you can specify here. And the source set to color, again, we're not going to talk about that. It's within shape tab right now. It's great for match moving if you want to make source to background 1, background 2, or color, but right now it's kind of irrelevant to what we're doing right now, so I'm not going to discuss it any further. Now, there are a few things that we need to be mindful of when we use Roto node in conjunction with merge node. So what I usually do, if I just go and select this viewer, and I'm going to detach my merge node and select the A pipe, press M, and that connects it to the A pipe, and you can always go Shift X to swap A and B pipe so you have the right coloration. I'm going to get rid of the property bin, and that gets rid of the overlay that I have. I'm going to bring the blur node, detach it as well. Let's talk about how we can create like a pleasing holdout. Now, holdout can happen through two operations within the merge node. Now, if you would like to, I'm going to set this one to, so if you would like to keep the shape of one node and keep the color of the other node, then mask would be a right choice. Now, mask operation kept the shape from the A pipe. As you can see, our A pipe is circular, and kept the color from the B pipe and creates a cutout or a hole. If you want to invert this, so basically we have a rectangle in yellow and the cutout from the A pipe is sphere, and you want to get that, then you switch to stencil. So stencil is the opposite of mask, which is quite useful and handy. And the good thing about this, you can even add a blur to the operation, and if you disable the merge, you haven't disconnected the B pipe, which is the dominant pipe. You know, we're just phasing out Roto 3 in here, which is the circle. So quite useful. Now, if I move here, so we can use the same trick to just see portion of our Marcy image here. So I'm going to select the B pipe to the background, A to the foreground, and then if I select the merge node and go to 1 and view my Roto node, let's just draw something really simple like so, right? I'm just going to select all of these guys, move it here and like that. If we want to look at Marcy through this sphere or hole, all we need to do is just to switch to mask. So if I go to mask, that's all I'm seeing, and I'm rotoing out the rest of the image using the Roto node. Remember, all of these small bits and pieces are keyable, so you can actually right click on these curves and move throughout your time slider and keyframe those one by one. So it's actually quite handy and very useful. And again, I can have a blur attached to it and look through the blur, and all I'm blurring is the portion that I'm looking at through my Roto node. Very useful. Now let's see how we can make use of what we've learned so far and actually plant a Roto shape, or any image for that matter, into an image. And this is something that I haven't discussed yet. Now if I go over here, I have an image and I applied reformat to it. I have another image which is the alpha of this image, and the alpha I have available on this read node is just a simple white. So this is the correct alpha that I want to implement and replace, right? And I have a simple background node that I would like to place as background. As you can see, I have the copy node, and in case if you would like to find it in here, it is under channel copy, and the hotkey for it is K, because C is color correct in Nuke. So K for copy, I think it's a good choice. Now if you press K and bring the copy, this node allows you to actually plant an alpha into another image. It doesn't need to be necessarily a good match. It can be any alpha node to be applied to the to the image that you have selected in your B pipe. So if I select this one to B and reformat to A and view it, well, we get an error. The reason we get an error is because if I select the copy node, it says, well, you're planning on bringing in RGB alpha into RGB alpha. Well, this is RGB alpha, so this part is correct, but this is not RGB alpha. If I were to create a Roto node, right, and give this Roto node RGB alpha, I can actually hold down Control Shift and swap. Then Nuke would be really happy that, all right, there's an RGB alpha here, and you asked for RGB alpha to alpha, and that works. And you can just select the Roto node and draw something, and that would be the alpha for this channel, right? So if I go here and have a look, that would be my alpha. Of course, that's not what I want. I want to attach this image. So I need to make some changes every time you bring an RGB with no alpha as an alpha channel, right? So this is RGB. Your entry says RGBA alpha, whereas this guy is RGB. Hopefully it makes sense. To fix that, all you need to do is to remove alpha. So you can select either R, G, B, anything without alpha. So I'm going to select RGB red, and now you can see the error is gone, and I successfully planted this alpha into my read 9 image. So if I hover my mouse and press A, you can see the alpha channel is there. Now I can use a simple merge node to the background and this guy to foreground. Of course, don't forget to put premult and get my background. Hope it makes sense, but that's one very simple, easy way to create alpha for channels or read nodes with incorrect alphas or without alphas. All you need to be mindful of is have a close look at your color chip, make sure that you're dealing with the right channel. If there's an alpha channel in there, then you have nothing to worry about. You can just use RGBA alpha, but if you have RGB, then make sure that alpha is disabled and you pick only red, green, and blue down the chain, pre-mult it, and assign it or merge it to whatever node you have in the background. Now with ID maps, it's actually fairly straightforward. All you need to have is a clean ID map that you can create in your 3D application packages. If you're using Arnold or RenderMan, it's just very easy to create an ID map, or an alternative would be to, if you're not comfortable with those methods, just assign a surface shader or AI flat and render the scene out. Now, the way that ID map works is very, very simple. I'm going to select that to my grade node. I'm going to plug this to my grade node, and you can see I've already assigned, if I double click on my grade node, you can see I already assigned a green color to my grade node, but because there is no alpha, everything looks green. Now what I need to do is to plug the A pipe to my alpha and use the mask in the grade node to enable my ID map. Now, the only change that I made is in the mask, because now mask is enabled. Nuke says, all right, you want to use mask, channel green. If I look at here, green is the bottle. And that's why the only affected area is the bottle. Now, if I want to affect the red channel is the clock. So if I go into grade and change this to RGB red, I'm only affecting the red channel. I can even go here and change the coloration to something different, let's say gold. So only affected area is the red channel. I can do the same thing with the blue channel. So looking at the ID, the blue channel is the books. So if I go into the grade node and say only affect the blue channel, all we're getting is the color correction or the grade node having an impact on the blue channel. Now I have another example. You can customize that even further. So if I double click on the Roto node, I said, all right, within this grade node blue channel for the books, I just want this portion to be seen as yellow. So although the whole, the stack of books are blue, I want this to be only affected. So that's the power of using mask to specify a region within whatever affected area you have in mind. So I'm just going to have a merge node using the mask, and then that would be the only affected area. So again, I can choose the same color here, something like that, and I can play around with that mask. And again, RGBA needs to be there, and then going to merge node with mask selected. If you select something like over, then you see everything. But if you select mask, and again, we are repurposing the knowledge that we've learned in this session, we're only using the affected area, which is exactly what we want. So the power of rotoscoping is literally endless, and I highly encourage you to play around with Roto node. Try to use it in conjunction with mats and alphas and ID maps, and customize the way your render or your footage looks with the help of color correct node and a grade node. Now I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and learned a thing or two, and see you guys in the next video.